They had everything: hundreds of stores, millions of loyal customers, decades of profits, and brands that everyone trusted. Then management made decisions so catastrophically stupid that they destroyed everything within years. We're not talking about bad luck or unavoidable circumstances. We're talking about deliberate, strategic choices that anyone with basic business sense could see were disasters, but arrogant executives pushed ahead anyway. 8 supermarket chains that had success handed to them on a plate, then systematically destroyed it through mismanagement so spectacular it should be taught in business schools as examples of what never to do. These failures cost thousands of jobs, devastated communities, and proved that having a successful business doesn't guarantee keeping it if management is incompetent enough. The decisions were so bad you'll struggle to believe qualified executives actually made them. Let's expose the catastrophic mismanagement.
Coming at number 8 is Morrisons' disastrous southern expansion. The 8th catastrophic mismanagement is Morrisons' attempted expansion into southern England in late 1990s, where a successful Yorkshire chain nearly bankrupted itself by opening stores in markets it didn't understand against entrenched competitors. The strategic error was believing the business model working brilliantly in North would automatically succeed in South, ignoring massive cultural, competitive and demographic differences between regions. The execution was spectacularly incompetent, with Morrisons choosing poor locations because prime sites were controlled by competitors, opening stores without adequate market research and failing to adapt offering to southern preferences. The timeline showed disaster unfolding rapidly, with southern stores hemorrhaging money from day one, losses mounting so quickly that continuing expansion would have bankrupted entire company, including profitable northern operations. Former Morrisons executives described this period as near-death experience, with board debates about whether to abandon South completely or continue throwing money at failing strategy, ultimately choosing retreat and survival. The miscalculation was assuming brand recognition and customer loyalty existed in markets where nobody knew Morrisons, essentially starting from zero against Tesco, Sainsbury's and Asda, who had decades of presence and entrenched customer bases. The competitive response was brutal, with established chains slashing prices in areas where Morrisons opened, using their financial strength to make new stores unviable whilst accepting temporary margin hits to eliminate threat. Consumer research showed southern customers seeing no reason to try unknown northern chain when they were satisfied with existing options, proving that expansion requires compelling differentiation, not just existing elsewhere successfully. The brutal truth is that Morrisons' southern expansion was a textbook example of arrogant management, assuming success in one market guarantees success everywhere, nearly destroying company through expansion strategy that ignored competitive reality and customer indifference.
Coming at number 7 is Safeway's loss of identity in 1990s and early 2000s, where management attempted to be everything to everyone and ended up being nothing to anyone. The strategic confusion involved simultaneously trying to compete with Tesco on price, Sainsbury's on quality, and Asda on value, whilst having resources to excel at none, and confusing customers about what Safeway actually stood for. The execution saw constant strategy changes, with stores being reformatted repeatedly, ranges changing every few months, and messaging shifting between premium and value, creating complete inconsistency. The timeline showed steady deterioration, with market share declining year after year as customers abandoned confused retailer for competitors with clear propositions, whether low prices, quality, or convenience. Former Safeway staff described frustration of implementing new strategies every 6 months, with management cycling through different approaches whilst never committing long enough for any to succeed. The miscalculation was believing that not having clear positioning was strength, allowing flexibility, when actually it was fatal weakness, making Safeway forgettable and giving customers no compelling reason to shop there. The competitive environment punished this confusion brutally, with focused competitors taking customers who wanted specific things, while Safeway's attempt to please everyone pleased nobody. Consumer research showed customers unable to describe why they'd choose Safeway over alternatives, with brand becoming generic middling option, selected only for convenience rather than positive attributes. The brutal truth is that Safeway's mismanagement destroyed value through strategic confusion, with competent management recognizing that clear positioning beats attempting everything poorly, but Safeway executives somehow never learned this basic retail principle.
Coming in at number 6, Somerfield's acquisition of QuickSave in 1998, where management combined two struggling chains thinking scale would solve problems, when actually it created disaster that destroyed both. The strategic error was believing that adding discount stores to mid-market chain would create synergies, when actually they were completely incompatible businesses requiring different operations, cultures, and strategies. The execution was spectacular failure, with integration being botched completely, QuickSave's discount model being corrupted by Somerfield management who didn't understand it, and neither chain benefiting from supposed synergies. The timeline showed rapid deterioration, with combined company losing money, QuickSave customers abandoning stores as discount positioning was undermined, and Somerfield customers getting nothing from acquisition except management distraction. Former employees from both chains described chaos, with systems being incompatible, cultures clashing violently, and management paralysis as company tried operating two different formats simultaneously whilst excelling at neither. The miscalculation was assuming that problems at both chains were operational, when actually they were strategic, with simply being bigger not solving fundamental issues of unclear positioning and operational inefficiency. The competitive impact was devastating, with Aldi and Lidl stealing QuickSave customers whilst Tesco and Asda took Somerfield shoppers, leaving combined company being destroyed from both directions simultaneously. Consumer research showed customers of neither chain being satisfied with changes, proving that acquisition created value destruction rather than creation through combining two weak businesses into one failing entity. The brutal truth is that Somerfield's acquisition of QuickSave was management hubris, believing that scale overcomes all problems, when actually it created larger, more complex disaster that ultimately destroyed both brands completely.
Coming in at number 5, Iceland's Booker acquisition. The fifth catastrophic mismanagement is Iceland's acquisition of Booker wholesale business for £1 billion in 2000, loading frozen food specialists with debt whilst attempting to operate completely unrelated business they had no expertise running. The strategic error was believing that vertical integration into wholesale would create synergies, when actually Iceland knew nothing about cash and carry operations, and Booker acquisition drained resources from struggling retail business. The execution was disaster from day one, with integration failing, Booker operations continuing to underperform, and massive debt from acquisition crushing Iceland's financial flexibility during a period when retail competition was intensifying. The timeline showed crisis developing rapidly, with Iceland shares collapsing as investors realised acquisition was catastrophic error, company burning cash servicing debt whilst retail sales declined, and bankruptcy becoming a real possibility. Former Iceland executives described watching helplessly as company was destroyed by acquisition that everyone except CEO opposed, with management paralysis as resources went to debt service rather than competing against supermarkets invading frozen food category. The miscalculation was epic, with Iceland founder Malcolm Walker believing his success in frozen retail automatically qualified him to run wholesale distribution, when actually they required completely different skills, systems, and strategies. The competitive environment punished this distraction ruthlessly, with Tesco, Asda, and others dramatically expanding frozen ranges whilst Iceland was focused on Booker disaster, systematically stealing customers who were Iceland's core business. Consumer research showed Iceland customers becoming dissatisfied with declining service and stores, whilst management was distracted by Booker integration, proving that acquisition destroyed value at retail operations that were company's actual business. The brutal truth is that Iceland's Booker acquisition nearly destroyed company through management hubris, with CEOs' ego-driven diversification almost bankrupting successful business that simply needed focus on core frozen food operations.
Coming at number 4 is Asda's decline under Walmart ownership. The fourth catastrophic mismanagement is Asda's decline during Walmart ownership from 1999 to 2021, where American giant's interference destroyed UK chain's competitive positioning and market-leading position. The strategic error was Walmart imposing American retail practices onto British market without understanding cultural and competitive differences, essentially treating Asda as American store that happened to be in Britain. The execution saw constant strategy changes dictated from Arkansas, with Walmart executives who'd never visited UK making decisions about product ranges, pricing, and operations that made no sense in British context. The timeline showed steady market share loss, with Asda declining from challenging Tesco for market leadership in early 2000s to distant fourth place by 2020s, losing ground to Sainsbury's, Morrisons, and dramatically to Aldi and Lidl. Former Asda executives described frustration of dealing with Walmart interference, with sensible British strategies being overruled by Americans who insisted on approaches that had failed repeatedly but headquarters refused to learn from. The miscalculation was Walmart believing their American success made them experts in all retail everywhere, when actually British market required different approaches that Walmart's arrogance prevented them recognizing. The competitive impact was severe, with Asda becoming operationally inefficient through Walmart's systems, losing price competitiveness through overhead costs, and failing to adapt to discount threat, whilst Walmart executives dismissed Aldi as irrelevant. Consumer research showed Asda customers becoming dissatisfied with declining service, poor stores, and loss of value proposition that had made Asda attractive, with many switching to Tesco or Aldi as Asda deteriorated. The brutal truth is that Walmart's ownership destroyed Asda's value through arrogant mismanagement, with American interference turning market leader into also-ran that required rescue acquisition by Issa Brothers to prevent complete collapse.
Coming in number 3, Tesco's hubris in accounting scandal. The third catastrophic mismanagement is Tesco's overexpansion and subsequent accounting scandal in 2014, where Britain's largest retailer's arrogance led to systematic fraud covering up operational failures. The strategic error was Tesco believing their dominance was permanent and pushing aggressive expansion internationally whilst ignoring declining UK performance and rising competitive threats. The execution involved opening stores everywhere regardless of profitability, entering markets like America where they failed spectacularly, losing billions, and maintaining growth facade through increasingly aggressive accounting. The timeline showed problems accumulating through early 2010s, with profitability declining, competition from Aldi and Lidl intensifying, and management pressure to maintain growth story leading to accounting fraud that inflated profits by £250 million. Former Tesco executives describe culture of fear where admitting problems was career suicide, with management demanding continued growth regardless of reality and middle managers falsifying figures to avoid consequences. The miscalculation was believing that size and dominance protected Tesco from competition, when actually their complacency and arrogance created vulnerability that discounters exploited ruthlessly. The competitive response was devastating, with Aldi and Lidl stealing customers whilst Tesco was distracted by international failures, forcing eventual admission that Emperor had no clothes and massive restructuring. Consumer research showed customers losing trust in Tesco during scandal, with many switching permanently to alternatives, proving that reputation damage from accounting fraud had lasting commercial consequences beyond legal penalties. The brutal truth is that Tesco's mismanagement nearly destroyed Britain's largest retailer through arrogant overexpansion and systematic fraud covering up failures, with accounting scandal being symptom of cultural problems that made admitting reality impossible until crisis forced truth.
Coming in at number 2, Co-op's disastrous banking venture. The second catastrophic mismanagement is Co-op Group's expansion into banking, culminating in near collapse in 2013, where management incompetence and governance failures nearly destroyed century-old mutual organisation. The strategic error was Co-op acquiring Britannia Building Society in 2009, taking on massive risks in financial services that management didn't understand, whilst creating toxic culture mixing mutual and commercial banking. The execution was criminally incompetent, with due diligence failing to identify billions in bad loans, integration being botched completely, and governance failures allowing unqualified executives to make catastrophic decisions. The timeline showed crisis developing through 2010 to 2013, with banking losses mounting, capital inadequacy becoming critical, and eventual near collapse requiring government intervention and complete management overhaul. Former Co-op executives describe a culture of denial where problems were ignored or covered up, with government structure allowing incompetent management to continue unchallenged until near bankruptcy forced reckoning. The miscalculation was believing that Co-op's retail success qualified them for complex financial services, when actually banking requires completely different expertise that management completely lacked. The impact extended beyond banking, with entire Co-op Group nearly being destroyed, threatening retail and funeral operations through contamination from banking crisis and reputation damage from scandal. Consumer trust was devastated, with revelations about management incompetence and governance failures destroying Co-op's ethical reputation, with customers abandoning stores and services associated with scandal-ridden organisation. The brutal truth is that Co-op's banking venture nearly destroyed Britain's largest mutual organisation through management incompetence, with executives having no business running banks being allowed to make catastrophic decisions that threatened century of cooperative movement history.
Coming in at number 1, Sainsbury's failed Asda merger. Taking the top spot is Sainsbury's attempted merger with Asda in 2018-2019, where management wasted 2 years and millions of pounds pursuing deal that regulators obviously would block, whilst ignoring competitive threats destroying market position. The strategic error was believing competition authorities would approve merger, creating entity controlling 30% of market, when anyone with basic antitrust understanding knew this was fantasy. The execution was arrogant and incompetent, with management proceeding as if approval was certain, making integration plans and public statements about synergies, whilst regulatory objections were obvious to everyone except executives pushing deal. The timeline showed 2 years wasted, with management focused on merger, whilst Aldi and Lidl continued stealing customers, competitive position deteriorating, and eventual regulatory blocking forcing humiliating retreat. Former Sainsbury's executives describe CEO Mike Coop's obsession with deal leading to complete distraction from operational issues, with retail business being neglected whilst management pursued regulatory-doomed merger. The miscalculation was catastrophic, with management somehow believing their arguments would overcome obvious competition concerns, when actually regulators correctly identified that reducing Big Four to Big Three would harm consumers through reduced competition. The competitive impact was devastating, with 2 years of operational neglect allowing continued market share losses, discounter growth, and strategic drift that left Sainsbury's significantly weaker when merger collapsed. Consumer research showed Sainsbury's customers becoming dissatisfied during period when management was distracted by merger, with many switching to alternatives whilst executives were focused on deal rather than serving existing shoppers. The brutal truth is that Sainsbury's merger attempt was most spectacular example of management hubris in recent retail history, with executives wasting 2 years pursuing obviously doomed deal whilst competitors destroyed their business, representing dereliction of duty that should have resulted in mass firings.
Lessons learned number 2. Strategic clarity beats attempting everything. The recurring lesson is that chains succeeding had clear positioning and stuck to it, whilst failed chains attempted to be everything to everyone and ended up being nothing to anyone. The focus on specific value proposition, whether low price, quality, convenience, or specialization, creates customer understanding about why they'd shop there rather than confusion about what retailer stands for. The execution requires discipline to resist temptation to chase every segment and category, accepting that clear positioning means deliberately not serving some customers rather than trying to please everyone poorly. Former retail consultants describe seeing same pattern repeatedly, with successful chains knowing exactly what they are, whilst failing chains constantly shift strategies trying to find a magic formula that pleases all customers. The competitive environment ruthlessly punishes strategic confusion, with focused competitors taking customers who want specific things, whilst confused retailers get customers who shop there only for location convenience. The lesson is that management must choose clear positioning and maintain it consistently rather than constantly changing strategies hoping something will work, because strategic confusion guarantees failure in competitive retail markets.
Number 1. Arrogance and hubris destroy successful businesses. The fundamental lesson is that success breeds arrogance, making management believe they're infallible, leading to catastrophic decisions that destroy decades of achievement. The pattern shows executives becoming convinced their past success means they cannot fail, ignoring obvious problems, dismissing warnings from staff, and pursuing strategies that anyone objective could see were disasters. The culture of arrogance prevents learning from mistakes, with executives doubling down on failing strategies rather than admitting errors, creating death spirals where problems accumulate until a crisis forces reckoning. Former retail industry observers describe seeing successful chains destroyed by executive hubris repeatedly, with the pattern being so predictable that warning signs are obvious to outsiders whilst insiders remain blind. The governance failures allow arrogant executives to continue unchallenged, with boards failing to provide oversight and intervention that might prevent catastrophic decisions being implemented. The lesson is that humility, willingness to admit mistakes, and listening to critics are essential for sustained success, whilst arrogance guarantees eventual failure, regardless of how successful business currently appears.
So there you have it, 8 supermarket chains that mismanaged everything, from Morrisons' disastrous southern expansion to Safeway's loss of identity, from Summerfield's quick-save acquisition disaster to Iceland's Booker catastrophe, from Asda's decline under Walmart to Tesco's hubris and fraud, from Co-op's banking venture nearly destroying mutual organization to Sainsbury's wasting years on obviously doomed Asda merger. The common threads are arrogance, believing success guarantees continued success, strategic confusion attempting everything whilst excelling at nothing, disastrous acquisitions combining weak businesses into failing entities, and management hubris pursuing obviously doomed strategies whilst ignoring operational reality.
These weren't unavoidable circumstances or bad luck, but rather deliberate decisions by qualified executives who somehow made choices that anyone with basic business sense could identify as catastrophic errors. The human cost was enormous, with thousands losing jobs because management incompetence destroyed successful businesses, communities losing stores, and suppliers being devastated when chains collapsed owing millions. The shareholder destruction was massive, with billions in value being eliminated through management decisions that enriched executives through bonuses whilst destroying companies they were paid to run successfully. The lessons are clear, with strategic focus, humility, and operational excellence being requirements for sustained success, whilst arrogance, distraction, and attempting everything guarantees eventual failure. Every mismanaged chain had been successful, with loyal customers, profitable operations, and opportunities to continue thriving, but executive incompetence destroyed everything through decisions that business school students could identify as obviously wrong. The survivors were those with management recognizing that retail requires constant attention to operations, customers, and competition, with any distraction or complacency creating vulnerability that competitors exploit ruthlessly. If you remember shopping at these chains during their prime, you witnessed spectacular management failures destroying successful businesses through decisions so incompetent they should be studied as examples of what never to do. Thanks for watching, and remember that having successful business doesn't guarantee keeping it if management is arrogant or incompetent enough, with retail being particularly unforgiving of strategic errors and operational neglect that mismanagement creates.